Children who grow up learning that it is a vital and important skill to read the mood and mind and behaviors and emotions of others, to essentially predict them before they happen, often become chronically hypervigilant adults who are also highly sensitive. Now, what really interests me is this crossover between those of us who often, we now realize, perhaps grew up in homes where undiagnosed autism ran its course among all of us, and also we had a more complex traumatic childhood. So here we have this sort of double whammy of trauma responses, of the brain, hi Bear, this is Bear, needing to always make sense of what's happening from a fight or flight perspective in that sympathetic state, but then often have to shut down what we would do to fight or flight because we cannot fight or flee from our own caregivers in childhood. So then we're often basically hitting that brake, right? The gas pedal is fight or flight, the brake is that dorsal vagal. And what's really interesting to think about is a response that has been called fawn, but I want to talk to you about fawn. Now, what bothers me about fawn is that it often gets interpreted through this lens of it's manipulative, you're people pleasing, and perhaps yes, but what I want to get to is the survival skill of faking a ventral vagal social exchange while being in the midst of fight or flight and a more dorsal vagal shutdown. So newer research has been talking about the difference between like Stockholm syndrome and how that really doesn't well regard victims. It sort of makes them seem like, oh, they fell in love with their captors or whatever, when really what they're doing is what I just described. They're often in these states, but able to sort of harness it in a way to present, to survive, to make themselves compliant, pleasing, acceptable to the harmful person. Now, in serious violent abduction situations, that makes sense as well. And I was thinking about The Handmaid's Tale. I just got caught up and I'm watching the new season. That part where Offred, where June, is essentially making the face and being compliant, but very much is not compliant. But what I'm thinking about as I'm working on a project right now is what happens to us when we are in these childhoods with caregivers who aren't always bad. Essentially, it becomes who we are. This being vigilant to who they are, but also making ourselves kind of shapeshifters to what they need. And even more important, this idea that really this is about appeasement. That when you have appeasement, when you're trying to appease someone else, you inherently have a power imbalance. But you know that, but you don't know that in childhood. So I want to change this conversation about how we wield these skills because, as I've said, most parents aren't bad all of the time. There are times where we feel really loved, but we have to dissociate, a dissociated kind of attachment to stay close to them while also never really provoking them and shutting down who we are.